Super excited to be back here with you learning about geometry. So we're starting a new chapter, chapter 10 in Go Math, and we're going to focus on points, rays, lines, and line segments for today's lesson. So you've probably heard of the word point before, right? But what does that mean in math? Think about, what does a point look like? If you have a piece of paper, go ahead and draw one. Draw what you think a point is. So a point, I'm going to draw one here. You see it's so small, right? It looks like a little dot. We refer, and here we have a little chart I'm going to enlarge. So we refer to a point in math as an exact location in space. Here you see the point drawn and it's labeled with A, okay? So that means it's called point A. So I would read it as point A. I would write it as point A. And an example is right here, like the point or the tip of a pencil, okay? Now we're going to take a look at a line. So a line, again, is a word that you're very familiar with, but in math, it represents a straight path of points that continue without an end in either direction. So here I have to add to my chart, and this is in your journal as well. So this is a good reference for you as you're working, but I'm going to put them on here too. So here I have a line, okay, with my definition. If I draw it, you'll see here, this line has 2 points on it called B and C, okay? So if I read this, I read it line BC, or I could actually say line CB as well, because it doesn't matter which order I say it in since the line continues in both directions. This is interesting. Here I have, and I'm just going to highlight this part with a circle. Here is how I write it. So I kind of have a shortcut, a symbol that I can use to write line. And I draw, almost looks like a mini line on top of the letters BC, or in this case, CB, because we can say it both ways. Okay, so when you're writing out line BC, you don't need to actually write the word line like you do here. That's just how we read it. You would use this symbol of the small line symbol on top of the letters, okay? And then here I have a picture, just an example of a line. And now this road would or could continue on forever, right? Because that's all we can see. Now we're going to talk about line segments. And this might be a term that you're not familiar with. So line segments look, I'm just going to add to my chart here, like this. You might be thinking, well, that looks just like a line, but you'll probably notice the difference here that there's no arrows on the end. So that means that this line segment has a starting point where D is and an ending point where E is. It doesn't continue on forever. There's no arrows to represent that. So you'll see that the line again has those arrows to continue on. That signifies that it continues on in both directions. The line segment here has a starting point and an ending point. And our definition on our chart says a line segment is part of a line between two endpoints. So this line segment is DE. To read this, we'd say line segment DE or line segment ED. It doesn't matter which way we say it because it's that line segment. It doesn't have a specific direction. And then here, just like before, we have this shortcut on how to write it. So we just draw a little line segment symbol. You don't need the points on both ends like we have here in the line segment, right? That's my attempt at an arrow. You don't need those points. You just have the small line on top and then the letters. And again, we can do it DE or ED. It doesn't matter which way we're saying it. An example of a line segment, sticking with kind of our road theme here, is this yield sign because it has a starting point and an ending point, and it's made up of 3 line segments, the sign. We're going to now add another term to our chart. This is a ray. A ray is a part of a line that has one endpoint and it continues without ending in one direction. So here we're going to add to our chart. Make this a little bit bigger to make it easier to read. Okay, here we go. So just like I said, the definition is that it has one endpoint and it continues without end in one direction. So you'll see here, there's just one arrow. That's because this ray is continuing on towards the right or in that direction forever, but it does have that starting point there. So we would call this ray FG. We can't call it ray GF. Why not? Think about that for a minute. Why can't we call this ray GF? I think you were thinking because it has a specific direction that it travels in. So this ray travels in the direction of the arrow. It travels FG, right? So that's how we have to name it. And then to write it, we have another symbol for ray, and it looks just like a ray. We don't need the points in it, but it has just like an arrow, and we call this FG, okay? So it continues in just that one direction. An example here is this road sign because there's an arrow there, right? So it's kind of like a ray there. To summarize our terms here, because some of these will look a bit similar, it can get confusing. We know that a line segment is part of a line between two endpoints, right? And the difference between that line segment and a line is that a line continues without end in both directions, which is signified by those arrows on both ends. And then a ray is part of a line that has one endpoint and continues without end in one direction. So we have these symbols here in the write it category, and that is how we write line segment, and ray in math, right? Using the letters for the points that are identified.